Alright, hello everyone. This is Miss Mays, and this is my first video, so bear with me, and we're all in this together. So, we're talking about classification of matter, and we have just done an activity, POGIL activity, where you looked at classifying matter at the atomic and molecular level. So we're just going to give us some solid definitions here that we can work with and have a common language with. Okay, so I'm going to start with this diagram here, and we're talking about matter. Okay, now matter is something that has mass and takes up space, but there are other things that exist that are not considered matter. So those are going to go out here to the right, and we're not going to talk about those too much, but an example of non-matter could be something like light or electricity. Okay, those do not take up space or have mass, but they do exist, and we know that we can interact with them in the physical world. So we'll keep those kind of in the back of our mind here. Alright, so back to matter. Matter can be divided into two main categories. Okay, we have heterogeneous matter and we have homogeneous matter. Now heterogeneous, hetero meaning different, homo meaning the same. Okay, so if we think about the roots of these words, we can kind of start to understand what they might look like. So let's talk about heterogeneous matter first. Now this hetero root meaning different, okay, matter is going to look different here. There's basically one type of heterogeneous matter, and that is a mixture. Okay, we're going to give you some examples here in a minute, but here's just kind of how it lines up. Alright, then we'll go over to homogeneous. There's two main types of homogeneous matter. Okay, the first would be a pure substance, and the second would be a mixture. Okay, so a mixture can either be heterogeneous or homogeneous, and we'll give you some examples of those. Okay, pure substances, there are two types of pure substances. You can either have an element or you can have a compound. Okay, so let's get some definitions for some of these vocabulary terms. So we'll start with matter. As I said before, it's anything that has both mass and takes up space. Okay, so pretty much anything you can think of. If you look around, most of the things that you see with your eyes are considered matter. Okay, some examples: a desk, a chair, even air has mass and takes up space. Even though we can't see it with our eyes, if you were to contain it inside a balloon, you could tell that it takes up space, and then you could actually compare the masses of two balloons by putting them on some type of a scale. Okay, another example would be water. Okay, anything you can think of basically that you can touch or feel is considered matter. Okay, some non-examples of matter, like I said before, energy would be one, so light and heat are considered energy. Ideas, stuff that you come up with, that's not matter. It still exists, but it's not matter. Information, and then a vacuum. Okay, outer space. There is nothing out there. It's considered a vacuum, so that would be non-matter. Okay, moving on, we have pure substances. These are a single element or a single compound. Okay, some examples of pure substances that you may be familiar with: distilled water, aluminum, okay, like tin foil, or aluminum foil, excuse me, iron, and table salt. Okay, so some of these are made up of multiple elements, like distilled water. We have hydrogen and oxygen. Aluminum and iron those are single elements. And then table salt, that is sodium and chlorine being combined together in a compound. They're still considered pure because they're chemically bonded together. Okay, next we have mixtures. Definition for mixture would be two or more pure substances that are physically combined. Keyword here is physically combined. We are able to separate them by physical means, so we don't have to perform a chemical reaction to get them apart. Some examples of mixtures would be salt water. Okay, this one seems like you might not be able to separate it by physical means, but if you boil salt water, okay, all of the water is going to evaporate and you're going to be left with salt. Now, we didn't perform a chemical reaction there because remember, when we change from a liquid to a gas, which you're doing with the water, you are performing a physical reaction. Another example would be Gatorade, and then a pretty obvious one would be pizza. We've got the dough, we've got the sauce, cheese, toppings. Those are all different substances and they're physically combined, easily separated. Okay. Heterogeneous. This is a mixture that is made up of pure substances that don't have a uniform composition. In other words, the different parts of this mixture can be seen. So some pretty easy examples would be M&Ms and Italian dressing. If you think about that Italian dressing, it has those different colored chunks in it of spices and oil, and you can see some of the vinegar. Okay, that's a heterogeneous mixture. You can see the different parts. Now, an example of one that we've seen was lab number 1. We mixed iron hydroxide. It was that yellow solution. We mixed that in a test tube with ammonia, and we formed, oh no, excuse me, we didn't mix iron hydroxide, we mixed iron chloride, and we formed this iron hydroxide. That was the precipitate we formed from lab number 1. Excuse my mistake there. Okay, next we've got homogeneous. Okay, this is matter, remember, that has a uniform composition. Okay, different parts cannot be seen here. And remember, this can be a pure substance or it could be a mixture. Some examples here would be air. Okay, air would be considered a mixture. You can't see the different elements, the different parts of air. It all looks the same. Okay, but you have different things mixed in there that are not chemically combined. Okay, copper would be considered a pure substance. Copper is an element, and when you look at a piece of copper, sample of copper, everything looks the same throughout. Kool-Aid is another example. This is a mixture, a homogeneous mixture, because when you look at a glass of Kool-Aid or milk, you can't see individual pieces. And then helium is another element you may be familiar with. This would also be considered homogeneous, and that would be a pure substance. Okay, we've got a compound. A compound is two or more different types of atoms that are chemically bonded together. Some examples that you may be familiar with are water, salt, and baking soda. Then we've got elements. Elements are substances made up of only one type of atom. So if you think back to your POGIL, there was an example of the element R, and R had only circles in there. Okay, so the only type of atom in there was circles, and so that would be considered an element. Some examples of elements you may know are gold, silver, and sulfur. And that's it for our notes today, so thanks for listening.